us, the deputy director, and said, look, we have a lot of people working for us. We need some way to select the people that are the most creative so they can go on the teams that are facing the toughest problems. Can you give us some kind of an instrument, a test or something that we can give to find those people? We didn't have such a thing, but we developed it, we applied it, and it was very predictive. It worked really well. But the idea emerged that, gee, we still don't know where creativity comes from. Is it that some people are born with it and others not? Or is it learned? Does it come from our experience in life? And the idea came up, this test is so simple. Why don't we give it to some children and see how they do? So we did. We created a sample of the American population with 1,600 children and started it out when they were about 5 years old. Now here's a question I want to ask you. This is a test for the ability to look at a problem and come up with new, different, and innovative ideas. What percentage of those 5-year-olds fell into what you might call the genius category of imagination? 80, 90, wow. This is a great audience. There are some audiences that don't guess quite that high. 98%. We were pretty shocked. Some people like you would probably not be shocked. You probably, I suspect you've been 5-year-olds, so there you are. But the information was so astonishing, we decided to turn that into a longitudinal study, go back 5 years later and see how they're doing it. So we went back, they're now 10. What would you guess? Somebody came on very close. 30%. We decided to extend it for 5 more years. They're now 15. Well, we have some pessimists out there. It was all the way up to 12. So you can see something of a trend here, right? That study ended because so many people got depressed. Most of the testing was done by teachers, and they just didn't want to do it again. But we have tested a lot of adults. And what would you guess? You're close. 2%. Now, the great historian Oswald Spengler once said, in all of his years of studying history, he had concluded it only takes 2% of a population to create the basic ideas and that everybody else applies them. And it turned out, gee, he was pretty close to right. Look, folks, if we're going to enter the future with hope, that's not going to work. We have to do something about it. And what we found with those children was the thing that I want to try to share with you and hope that you walk out of here tonight knowing why that happened and what you can do about it, because you have the possibility of being in that 98% tomorrow. And I'm serious about that. What we found from the studies with children and from looking at the way brains work, that we can actually do that. There are 2 kinds of thinking that occur in the brain, and they use different parts of the brain, and it's a totally different paradigm in the sense of how we form something in our minds. One is called divergent, that's imagination. That's generating new possibilities, and the other is called convergent, and that's where you're making a judgment, you're making a decision, you're testing something, you're criticizing, you're evaluating. So one is like an accelerator, and the other one is like the brake. We found that what happens to these children as we educate them is we teach them to do both kinds of thinking at the same time. So when somebody asks you to come up with new ideas, as you come up with them, what we've mostly learned in school is to start looking at them immediately and trying to say, oh, well, you can hear the stuff that goes on. We've done that before, we've never done that, that's crazy, that'll cost too much, all of that. When you actually look at what's happening inside the brain, you find that neurons are fighting each other and actually diminishing the power of the brain because we're constantly judging, criticizing, etc. This is not going to work, folks. You need to find the 5-year-old, and you can. That capability never goes away. That part of the brain that produces this wonderful imagination is something you exercise every day when you're dreaming. So the great designer said, I'm going to put that mechanism so they exercise it every day in case they ever need an idea. You've got that capability, absolutely. And you'll move from the normal brain, which is that colored area shows normal thinking, to a brain that is very active everywhere, particularly in the front. So it gets worse, because if we're operating under fear, we're using even a smaller part of the brain. And as we begin to use logic, we use more, but we begin to use creative thinking and the brain lights up. It's just extraordinary what happens. And nature does this as well, we found. That evolution works that way, producing many alternatives, then through natural selection, selecting the best ones. But it's always creating a lot of possibilities before it starts selecting. So the question we face for the future is, are we going to be in a culture that depends on right answers, that are repeatable, that are always predictable? Or are we going to have a culture where whatever it is we're thinking about, a new recipe or a spaceship, are there many possibilities? Can we create a new future that solves the new problems that we have never seen before? So Einstein was right. And your issue is to go beyond the first step that we took and take the first leap and turn your 5-year-old on to tap into that imagination that every one of you has that can make the future extraordinarily brighter for everybody. Tomorrow, do an exercise. Pick up a table fork, turn your 5-year-old on, and come up with 25 or 30 ideas on how to improve. Let that 5-year-old figure out ideas on how to improve that table fork. You can begin that exercise, and like anything else, you can start exercising that part of the brain and turn yourself into a great innovator of the wonderful future we can have if we start doing this. Thank you.